Good afternoon and welcome to the City of Rapid City's Legal and Finance Committee meeting for Wednesday, May 30th, 2018. I'd like to start the meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum, please, Stacy. Here.
Here.
Thank you. The chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drury with an amendment to today's agenda.
Yes, Madam Chair. I would like to add number 11, Joint Powers Agreement between the Department of Public Safety, Division of State Radio Communications, and Pennington County and the City of Rapid City.
Second.
I've got a motion to Alderwoman Drury adopt today's agenda with this addition. With a second by Armstrong. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of adopting today's agenda by adding item number 11?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Today's agenda has been adopted as presented. However, we are adding an item number 11 at the end. I believe Chief Jagaris will let us know why it's being walked on and when we get to it. It will be on non-consent. Now is the time for general public comment. This is a time for any member in the audience to address the committee members on any item currently not on today's agenda. I have no speaker request forms for general public comment. Am I missing anyone in the audience? No, we're going to move on to consent items. Consent items on today's agenda are items 1 through 7. We're opening public comment on consent items 1 through 7. I have no speaker request forms on consent items 1 through 7. Am I missing anyone in the audience? Seeing none, public comment on consent items 1 through 7 is now closed. If there's any item that a committee member would like considered separately, I'd like to hear from them now. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent items 1 through 7 in totality. Got a motion by Lewis to approve consent items 1 through 7, second by Laurenti. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We're now on to the non-consent items, items 8 through 11. And I do have 2 speaker request forms. We'll start with Kaylee Sterrerud. And if you could approach the podium, there's a microphone on the podium. Please state your name and your address, and you have the ears of the committee members.
I am Kaylee Sterrud. My address is 1620 5th Street here in Rapid City. And I want to discuss number 9, the mobile food vendor ordinance. The first the first statement or sentence in number 1, all mobile food vendors must abide by all federal, state, and local laws, rules, and regulations, is extremely vague and overgeneralized. I would like to motion that it be either removed or that they specify which federal, state, local laws, rules, and regulations that it's addressing, because federal and state guidelines vary. For instance, Rapid City does not require us to have a fire suppression system in our hood ventilation system. However, we have that with our trailer. I know a lot of food trucks in the area do not have that. So that would be something that is in effect elsewhere that, with that generalization, would have to be adapted by the city. And it was brought up to me when I talked to Carla, the assistant city attorney, that could include like traffic and state licenses and discrimination and ADA. So if those are the things that is supposed to include, that those be listed instead of generalized with that. And the second sentence of that, the number 1 under A, is mobile food vendors must operate in compliance with all state laws and regulations. I would like it to add and city, because that's what this is bringing up, and must maintain continuous licensure with the state of South Dakota Health Department, which, if they want to continue with the first sentence in clarifying what they would like us to have, that it be added in there. The second item that I would like to change is under A, number 5. I know that it was changed from 30-gallon trash cans and recycling bins to 13 gallons. If we're on private property, if the property owner already provides those services, that the food truck or food vendor would not be required to have additional trash receptacles. The reason for that thought is, for instance, in a few hours I'm going to set up at Lost Cabin Brewery, and they have trash cans inside, which is where a lot of my customers go and eat, or my customers take it into their vehicle and take that trash with them. So if a customer is eating in Lost Cabin, the chances of them walking all the way back out to the food truck to actually throw away their trash is very unlikely. So I just think that if we're on private property and there's already trash receptacles and recycling bins available, that it would be unnecessary for a food truck to have additional. And that is all I have.
Thank you. And the second speaker request form for item 9 as well is Kaya Smith. If you'd approach the podium, state your name and your address. And you've got about 3 minutes to address the committee.
Oh, okay. Hi, my name is Kaya Smith. My address is 13774 Latigo Lane, Piedmont, South Dakota. I'm new to all this, so if I do it wrong, I'm sorry. So I am also talking about the mobile food vendor ordinance, and I just had a couple issues that I wanted to discuss as well. So if we look at, let's see here, B3, I just thought that that was a little vague. Operate within the city park. Well, initially B says prohibited conduct. No mobile food vendor shall operate within a city park without receiving permission or obtaining a vendor permit as actable from the city Parks and Rec Department. I just thought that that was kind of vague. It's maybe just a little nitpicky, but because you guys also talk about special food services. If you're doing a special event, then you don't need it, but I just thought that that was just a little vague. It might be a moot point, but really I wanted to touch on number 6. Well, it says, project audible, amplified music or sound or make any unreasonable loud noise for purpose of advertising or attracting attention to the mobile food vending establishment. So this would really prohibit someone from an ice cream truck if they're going between neighborhood and neighborhood and they have music. So I think that something needs to be put into place that's saying, you know, if you have, and I'm not sure what the wording would be or needs to be, but, you know, I think that you guys are trying to target from people that are sitting in the park themselves making noise, but for an ice cream food truck that goes from house to house that's making noise, I mean, they're not trying to be obnoxious, but I think that, you know, if they're trying to attract people to come to their necessarily truck to sell ice cream, that's the old-fashioned way of selling ice cream. I don't know about you guys, but I remember an ice cream truck coming through my neighborhood, and they made noise. They just didn't come through without making noise. So I had recently purchased a truck to do an ice cream truck and have not had it on the road yet, but was wanting to play music. So that is my thought on that. That's it. There's my 3 minutes.
Thank you. I have no other speaker request forms for non-consent items, items 8 through 11. Am I missing anyone in the audience? Seeing none, we're going to close public comment and move on to the actual items. Item number 8 is the introduction and first reading of ordinance number 6261, an ordinance to amend Rapid City Municipal Code Section 12.24.050 to allow e-bikes on city bicycle and pedestrian trail systems. Chair would like to recognize Alderwoman Drury.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to take a brief moment to thank Acme Bikes for giving us the opportunity to ride them. It rained the day I was going to go, so I didn't have the opportunity to, but I spend a lot of time on the bike path, and I appreciated their willingness to share the experience with the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
I've got a motion by Laurenti to approve, second by Armstrong. Any further comments? Seeing none. I know that this was if nobody minds, I'll just make a comment or two. I know that this was discussed briefly at one of our other meetings about e-bikes, and if anybody's interested in it, it's not like an email. It's not a fake bike somewhere in the intranet. It's actually a bike. It does have a semi-motorized component to it, but it is not a motorized bicycle. So if anybody is really interested in looking at it between first and second reading, it will go through 2 readings at Legal and Finance and City Council. We just want to make sure everybody's aware of it, because as soon as we pass this e-bikes, I do not want people to think they can automatically take a motorized bicycle out on the paths. There are specific criteria that makes these bicycles an e-bike. So just want to, since no one else commented on it, want to make sure that everybody knows what we are talking about. So I do have a motion on the floor to approve first reading. It's already been seconded by Armstrong. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9 is the second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6250, an ordinance amendment to adopt regulations concerning mobile food vendors by adopting provisions in Title 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code. And I do know that there was some language that was changed between our first reading and our second reading. Carla, would you mind coming up to the podium and start off by giving us an explanation of what language was changed between first reading and second reading?
Thank you. Before the last Legal and Finance meeting, I met with Kaylee and another food truck owner, and we made a couple adjustments. The first one is to section A5 about the private trash bins and recycling bins. It had said 30 gallons each, and we made a change to reduce that to 13 gallons each, and also said that trash bins shall be anchored or otherwise secured upright. That was a suggestion of the food truck owners, which I thought was a terrific one. The other change was made on section B5 to the signage provision. It had said signage on the truck only, but we changed that to say you can have 2 additional banners or signs just within 100 feet of the vending operation. So those were the changes that were made.
Thank you. Chair would like to recognize Alderman Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess, in light of some of the things that were pointed out, I don't know if it'd be prudent to continue to change a couple things, like the ice cream truck thing. I think it's pretty obvious to everybody up here that we need to allow them to play music. I don't know how the Pied Piper's ever going to...
If I could speak to that.
Sure,
Yes, I was going to
absolutely.
say, Alderman Lewis, if you don't mind, because I don't believe the interpretation of the questions that were asked were in context of the actual ordinance. Carla, could you expound on that?
We have a separate ordinance that regulates ice cream vendors. And I don't know what it says about music because I haven't looked at it. This was the first time this came up. But mobile food vendors under this ordinance are prohibited from operating in the right-of-way. And ice cream trucks, but it also exempts ice cream trucks from this regulation because they're covered elsewhere. Ice cream trucks can bend from the right-of-way. That's how they operate. So that's what I would offer on the ice cream issue.
Okay.
Alderman Lewis, I believe you had other...
Oh, well, the other thing was just the private trash thing. Actually, I personally don't have a problem with that part, just because I think just in case there isn't a trash can there, I mean, there's nothing wrong with having a trash can with you, so I don't see it as a big hardship on the owner, personally. Just, I do appreciate you taking the time to meet with these folks and get some other things clarified, though, and hopefully we can move forward. Thank you.
Chair would like to recognize Alderman Laurenti.
Thank you. And Carla, I had a question for you as well while you're here on this subject. One of the speakers spoke about the vagueness of it, but I take it that that's generally, when we deal with these types of things, we try to keep them somewhat broad. So is there anything that we would need to, that you felt like needed to be adjusted based on that speaker's comments about state and federal, complying with state and federal?
Well, I guess I would say we could, their obligation to comply with federal law doesn't we can't affect that. So whether or not it's in our ordinance or not, then that's something that needs to be, or that they need to comply with. I think the language is similar to ones that we have elsewhere in our code, where it's just puts people on notice, hey, these aren't the only rules that you need to comply with. And food trucks are very familiar with the state rules about this. It's just kind of it's intended as a heads up to say there may be other rules that apply to you, but here are the ones that the city is imposing. And then, they have to look into those on their own.
Okay, and that's how I took that as well, so. Thank you. I yield.
Any further questions? I've got a motion by Drury to approve second reading. Second by Laurenti. Before I ask for a vote, the only other thing, Carla, that I will say is I appreciate the ladies coming up and asking those questions. But again, in looking at, and I do this a lot of times too, when you look at just one ordinance or one section of our ordinance, you can, and your filter is on for specifically what you do privately, you may not be able to read the rules and regulations that are put into place. So what we're trying to do, and I'm really addressing the two ladies in the audience, is to cover the bases saying exactly what you both stated, and that is there are federal rules that have to be applied. There are state rules. What the city does is the city can come back and say, yeah, you have to abide by all those, plus within our city limits you have to do these things. And so there's different sections in it, and I'm glad you came and spoke to us today. I really appreciate it. But I think this now is written and covers, I think, everybody's safety and public health at this point, and be able to do that. So if there's any council member who wanted to raise a question from anybody, they could address anybody else. But if not, we're going to go ahead and take a vote, because I have a motion and a second. Oh, and also just to let you know, this is a recommending body. This will actually be held on Monday night city council meeting, where it will go before the full council for final approval. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 10 is the second reading and recommendation of ordinance number 6257, an ordinance to amend Chapter 5.12 of the Rapid City Municipal Code to incorporate changes to the state law regarding alcoholic beverages.
Second.
Got a motion by Laurenti to approve, second by Drury. Anybody have any questions? Carla, if you don't mind, I believe you drafted this one as well? Yes. And I do just had a question. I know that primarily, again, this is a city ordinance that is backing up the laws that were changed at the state level and will become effective or became effective.
They'll be effective July 1.
Okay, so they're going to be effective July 1st. But one of the significant ones that, if I recall, the state legislature is, and I may have this backwards, so I'm going to ask you to correct me, is that in state law it used to be that no alcohol could be sold on Sunday unless specifically authorized. And now this changes it to be alcohol can be sold on Sunday unless specifically not allowed. Do I have that right, or do I have that backwards?
Maybe Pauline can answer. Good question.
You used to have an ordinance that said that it allowed Sunday sales, but that actually changed prior to this last legislative session. This legislative session, what you're going to see in this ordinance, primarily, there's some little tweaks here and there too, but primarily they got rid of the package malt beverage license, which is considered an off sale, and now it's an on-off sale and not just package. And so we have some restrictions that we're going to do internally, where we're going to notify them when they renew that even though you're an on-off sale now, because they had to apply for it, even though you'd be an on-off sale, your location currently is only authorized for off sale. If you choose to do on sale, you have to go through the conditional use permit, and then there is no guarantee that you would be approved for that site.
Thank you, Pauline, because I just wanted to bring this up. This kind of went through Legal and Finance and City Council. I forgot to pull it last Monday because I was going to ask those questions, because there were some significant changes, and they seemed small at the time, but within our city limits and the alcohol licenses, they can be quite significant. based on what we were doing it. And so, like, I did not realize, and thank you for letting us know that, Pauline, that some of our liquor license holders will have to come back through if they actually want to tweak their license as far as what they can do. So, thank you. Any further questions? I do have a motion? And a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 11 is, as read, a joint powers agreement between the Department of Public Safety, Division of the State Radio Communications, and Pennington County and the City of Rapid City. And if the committee would indulge me, I'd like to let Chief Jegaris go ahead and explain this, because he requested this to be a walk-on item today. So, Chief, if you wouldn't mind explaining.
Thank you for letting us add this to the agenda. Essentially, as most of you know, 3 years ago, the City and County Dispatch Center allowed the state to join us, and we began providing services for the Highway Patrol and other state agencies. And so 3 years ago, we had an initial joint powers agreement, and over the course of the past 3 years, we have evaluated the personnel costs and the time resources needed for each agency, and have made a determination that the state was requiring more resources, and so that it would be fair for them to make a larger contribution. So over the course of the past year, the dispatch director and deputy director who are present, they've been negotiating behind the scenes with the state to encourage them to increase their contribution. And just last week, they were able to finalize that negotiation, and the state has agreed to increase their contribution by a little over $60,000. And the reason why we requested that it be walked on is there is a timeliness factor in that the state operates under a fiscal year budget that ends at the end of June, and a condition of their increase is that they would like to make payment prior to the end of their current fiscal year. So they actually require the agreement to be signed prior to June 11th. It will also be going in front of the county commission for the commission chairman's signature next week. And this is very beneficial for the city of Rapid City. So I would encourage your support to allow the mayor to sign.
Thank you, Chief. Got a motion by Lewis to approve, second by Laurenti. Any follow-up? Chief, the only follow-up I have is, by meeting the June 11th, and that will allow both the county and the city to meet their 20-day notification after approved in order to meet this June 30th deadline in order to get the funds?
Yes, the state is willing to make payment upon the council meeting and the commission meeting all next week. So it'll satisfy their needs.
All right. Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, again, this is a recommending body, so this item being walked on today will actually go before full city council Monday night for full consideration. But the recommendation today for this walk-on item is for approval. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to approve.
Got a motion by Drury to adjourn, second by Armstrong. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.